Okay, so you brought us a really thought-provoking piece today. Larken Rose's article, The Lynchpin of Tyranny. Wow, even the title grabs you.
It certainly does.
And our goal here for this deep dive is really just to unpack what Rose is getting at. His core ideas about authority, oppression,
Wow.
how it all links together.
Exactly. And his central claim is pretty stark, isn't it? He's essentially saying that all oppression, like no matter the form, relies on people basically buying into the idea of legitimate authority.
Right, believing someone should be in charge.
Yeah, a widespread acceptance. It's definitely a challenging place to start. Makes you question things right off the bat.
It really does. And he kicks off by pointing out something we see, well, everywhere, really, these warnings about corrupt people getting power.
In stories, movies.
Yeah, exactly. But Rose says, hang on, this isn't just a movie plot. This reflects something real. He talks about politicians, right?
Sure.
And the tactics they use.
Oh, yeah. Those like totally fake feeling photo ops or even, outright bribery claims. Ways they kind of game the system.
To get power, keep power.
And what's interesting, I think, is that he's not just saying, oh, there are a few bad politicians. He's kind of hinting that the structure itself, maybe it encourages that.
Or tracks it.
Could be. He draws some pretty intense historical lines, too. Mentions Nazi Germany's rise, even allegations of election issues in the U.S.
Right, so it's not a new problem, this struggle for control or questioning who's really legitimate.
Exactly. But then he takes it a step further, which I found interesting. He says, maybe these elected folks, the ones we argue about, maybe they aren't even the real power.
Okay. So who is?
Well, he calls it a ruling class, operating behind the scenes, puppets and puppet masters.
And does he name names? Or institutions?
He does. He points fingers squarely at big global financial players, specifically calls out the Federal Reserve, the IMF.
Ah, the money trail.
Pretty much.
What?
He sees them as key parts of this system pulling financial strings.
Now, some might say that's a bit simplistic, right?
Yeah.
Blaming it all on the banks.
Well, yeah, you could argue that. These are incredibly complex systems, and
Right.
politicians do have agency. It's not always just following orders. But Rose's argument is that these financial bodies hold a really fundamental kind of control.
And he suggests further reading on this.
He does, yeah. He really pushes the creature from Jekyll Island. Says it explains how this kind of centralized banking control got started, like the history behind the Fed, how it shifted power.
Gotcha. So he sees that book as evidence for his puppet master theory.
Seems like it, yeah. He finds that historical take pretty convincing for his argument about where the real power sits.
Okay, so it's not just domestic politics then. He expands this out, right, to like global influence.
Totally. He talks about foreign powers, mentions Russia, China, those international banks, again, being able to influence things, not by sending in tanks necessarily,
Right, how?
by essentially buying influence,
Yeah.
paying off decision makers inside a country. So politicians might not just be acting badly on their own. They might be, compromised by outside interests.
Which brings up that point he makes.
Yeah.
Why do we get so much more worked up about, say, foreign interference than maybe domestic control?
Right. That's a fascinating question he raises. Why is their influence seen as so terrible, but we're kind of okay with our own government having immense power?
What's his answer?
Conditioning, basically. He argues we've been trained, maybe over generations, to see our own government's authority as normal, as legitimate. Foreign interference messes with that narrative, so it feels worse.
It's about perception then. What we're told is legitimate versus what isn't.
Exactly. And that leads right into, I think, the absolute core of his whole piece, the real kicker.
Okay, let's hear it.
He uses these metaphors, right? The ring of power, the reins of government. And then he asks this question that just stops you in your tracks.
It's
basically, if we're all so terrified of the wrong people getting this power, why do we keep insisting that anyone should have it at all?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that hits hard.
Doesn't it? Like his other analogy, leaving a loaded gun on the table?
And then acting surprised when someone uses it badly.
Precisely. Why keep putting the gun there? It forces you to question that basic need for someone to be in charge. Is that really necessary?
Yeah, it challenges everything.
Yeah.
Which brings him to his main point, I guess, that authority itself is the issue.
Bingo. That's his central thesis. Authority isn't like gravity. It's not a law of nature. It's a belief, something we collectively agree to uphold.
And he tackles that common idea, right? The we just need better leaders argument.
Oh, completely. He confronts it head on. People say, yeah, power corrupts, but if we just elect good, honest people.
And Rose says,
He says, absolutely not. That's missing the point entirely. It's not about finding better rulers. His direct quote is pretty stark. No, we need no power structure at all.
Whoa. Okay. No structure. That's radical.
It's incredibly radical. Dismantle the whole concept of rulers and ruled. Don't just swap out the players, change the entire game. Or rather, get rid of the game.
So how does he see change happening then, if not through politics? He talks about invasion too, but in a different way.
Yeah, that was interesting. He basically says a classic military invasion, like tanks rolling in to take over the U.S. Probably not going to happen. Too many citizens are armed.
Okay, so that's not the threat he sees.
No. The real enslavement, as he puts it, happens differently.
How?
He says it happens through belief, through authority, through your own consent to be ruled. It's internal.
So the tools of this enslavement are our own institutions.
That's exactly his point. He lists them. Congress, police, the IRS, CIA. He argues these are the instruments already in place.
And they only function because?
Because we believe they have the right to rule. We consent, actively or passively, to their authority. Take away that belief, he argues, and their power evaporates.
He's definitely not pulling punches about those institutions. He sees this belief in the state, statism, as the root of a lot of bad stuff.
A huge amount. Yeah, he calls statism the engine behind atrocities. He lumps in war machines, central banks, agencies like the CIA, DEA, ATF, even taxation.
Which he all.
Legal theft. Pretty blunt. He argues all these things are built entirely on that foundation of perceived legitimate authority.
Does he give an example of how that works?
Yeah, the CIA one is pretty vivid. He says, imagine if the CIA couldn't just take tax money for its secret operations. Imagine if it had to, like, ask for donations like a charity.
Yeah, okay. Billions for black ops via bake sales? Probably not.
Exactly. His point is they only exist and operate on that scale because they're assumed to have the right to take the money and exert that power, whether individuals agree or not.
So, given this really critical view, this radical rejection of authority,
Yeah.
what does he actually want people to do? It's not protests or voting, is it?
No, it's not about physical action or political reform in the usual sense. It's much more internal.
Like a mind shift.
Precisely. He calls it a mental revolution. His core message is basically yank the linchpin out of your own mind. That linchpin being the belief in authority.
And help others do it too.
And help others do the same, yeah. That's how we win, in his words. It's about changing consciousness individually and then collectively.
And he thinks this belief isn't natural, that it's been put there.
Yeah, he frames it almost like social programming. He even mentions the Prussian education model, suggesting its goal was partly to create obedient citizens who just accept authority without question.
So the idea is, if enough people just stop believing in the legitimacy of it all,
then the whole structure crumbles, because its only real foundation is that belief. Once that goes, the power structure collapses. That's his analysis anyway.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into the linchpin of tyranny, it really circles back to that final question he poses, doesn't it?
It really does, that haunting question. Who put this linchpin here?
Yeah. And maybe that's the main thing to take away from this. Not a specific action plan, but a prompt.
A prompt for some serious self-examination. He's really pushing us to look at our own beliefs about who has the right to tell us what to do and why we believe that.
It really makes you think, hey, where in my life do I just accept authority without thinking? You know, with government or institutions, maybe even just certain people.
Exactly. What's the actual basis for granting that authority? Questioning that, just internally. That seems to be the starting point Rose is advocating for.
A personal exploration of power, belief, and maybe, ultimately, freedom.
It could be a pretty profound place to start thinking, yeah. Definitely leaves you with a lot to chew on.